To come in. We got quite an audience today, and thank you for all for joining us. And let's get into this right away. Good morning. My name is Scott Hamilton. I'm president of the Executive Next Practice Institute, coming to you from the University of California, Irvine, Beale Applied Innovation. So we've got a very unique show for you today in that you are very much participants in this. This is not a webinar, and it's set up as a meeting. So you're coming in as most of your Zoom meetings with all the challenges of a Zoom meeting, particularly with ultimately north of 200 people participating in the call today. But with that, we're going to ask you to kind of follow some rules of the road here. That is, mute your video and your audio. Please do that right now. Take a look, make sure you're muted, both video and audio at this point. Use your chat feature or Q&A function to communicate with us. You can do so privately or publicly. Particularly use the chat feature when you're in a breakout room so that we can hear your thoughts and your ideas. When you're in the breakout room, which is coming up, or our general discussions at the end of this session, we'd like you to then, when you have a question or comment, then unmute yourself and come on video and simply raise your hand so that we can see you and get you in there as part of the conversation. You may have to raise your hand and wave a flag to let us know you're there, given the number of people here, but we do want to hear from you throughout this presentation. When the facilitators are guiding you in the breakout session or the panelists are speaking, you'll be able to see them as well. But again, for most of the time, you'll want to keep your video and audio muted so that we can focus on the topic at hand. All right, today's theme. We're really at a pivot point, and I want to thank our program team members for helping us put this together since last August. This is our fifth diversity, equity, and inclusion session. Our theme today really now becomes this, that diversity winners these days are employing a systematic approach to inclusion and diversity, and they don't fear taking bold action now to foster that kind of inclusion. So today we really want to talk about from an organizational sense, from a business sense, from a community sense, where are the inclusion gaps and what are organizations doing to overcome them? To help us do this, we've got an absolutely stellar lineup of thought leaders that have been assembled. And again, I want to point out some of these folks have been part of our program team since last August and even for years. Again, this is our fifth annual event, probably sixth annual actually. And we've had these program team members like Dr. Dina Brown, Enrique Malatera, Stacy, who have been with us, Anita Plight-Wilson, of course, and Michelle, who have all helped us put this team together, as well as other people in the program team, help us put this agenda together in this unique format. Here's what the agenda looks like. I'm going to go through this quickly. This is all the PowerPoint you're going to see today, by the way. We're going to focus on conversation versus PowerPoint. First of all, we're going to open up with Dr. Anita interviewing Will and Derek about what a specific case example and sharing with us some real successes they've had with their own initiatives. Then we're going to get into some audience collaboration. You will be pre-assigned, all of you that are participating, into a particular breakout room. And our production team right now is getting that set up so you'll automatically be pushed into a breakout room when the time comes. And you'll be facilitated by these individuals, Dr. Brown, Stacey Gordon, Enrique, and Michelle. When you come back out of the breakout room, and this is a timed breakout room, 12 minutes, you'll automatically come back in and we'll hear what you had to say in those breakout discussions, plus any other comments that you want to make. Then we'll go to our panel of experts talking about specific strategies, techniques, initiatives that they found that have been effective in promoting DEI. And really excited about this because we're covering the world here, both externally and internally. And then finally, all of us hopefully will come up with some very practical, what we call next practice solutions about where we take things from here. And then we'll go into closing thoughts. We've left some time in here for discussion, and I'm not going to do a formal close. I will do a formal close, but I'm also going to leave the dialogue open so that, again, you can all see each other and can do some strategic connecting and networking to some degree at the close of this session. So we'll do a formal close, but just know we'll leave this open for a bit so those of you who are on the line can have a dialogue. All right. A little bit about your host. The Executive Next Practice Institute, again, we're based at University of California, Irvine, Beal Applied Innovation. This is number 417 forums, workshops that we've done over the past 11 years. We've got a global audience of 85,000 people plus. They're C-suite executives from all industry sectors, primarily decision-making people. The picture on the right, that goes back to the good old days of March 2019, when we all met here at the University of California, Irvine in our in-person sessions, which we hope to get back to as we move back into 2022. Who attends E&P? And this is why we're so glad that you're part of this today. It's top enterprises to enterprise level companies, usually 10 million revenue and up. We have companies that have 20 million in revenue and thousands of employees, as well as smaller companies of 80 employees, $100 million in revenue, $100 million in revenue. Key functional leaders are part of this, innovation ecosystem principles, thought leaders and influencers from across the globe. And we've seen literally hundreds of them, even in this time of COVID since last March. Here's our own numbers. I asked our team to take a look at our own diversity numbers. We currently have 56% of our network are women. That 44% was the 2014 number. 41% of our network identify as non-white. That was a 30% number in 2014. So our own numbers have dramatically changed, improved over the years, primarily because we really put a real emphasis on being in the right place at the right time and having the right content. Here's what's so critical right now in the good old days of 2021. It really requires a new way of connecting with people. For all of us, we have seen a substantial loss of our connections in the past 90 days. 17% of our network has gone away over the past year through no fault of our own. It's just this Zoom environment that we're in. So we have to meet this challenge of maintaining our connections and creating new ones. And that's why E&P is such an important platform for you to do that. So our value proposition is this. I'm going to go through this very quickly. We are not a networking group. We don't want you to network today. It's about network building, much different scenario where you're developing authentic connections that will take you through not only this environment, but whatever the next normal may be. So that's important. You'll always hear from both startups as well as larger enterprise companies in these meetings. You'll meet the key members of the innovation ecosystem. And then finally, we want you to walk away with something specific. I hope you walk away today with 20 ideas. If you walk away with one that you can employ tomorrow or this afternoon, that's a win for us. I really want to thank our title sponsors. These folks have stepped up. Our neighbor, our corporate neighbor here, Medtronic, literally next door to us. Thank you. Thank you for Reed Pacific for joining us. You'll hear from Will and Derek in just a moment. Thanks to our media partner, Jason Duncan of Miller Farm Media and his team for all the work they do. And you'll hear from Jason later today as a communications expert as well on DEI. Our supporting sponsors, McKinsey and BPM, thank you so much for being part of this network and supporting this session. All these folks have stepped up to make this happen. And then of course, our partner organizations that we work with, part of our innovation ecosystem, our great partner Forbes, the Greater River Red Chamber, all of these folks have been very much part of our ecosystem and support our events and are partner to what we do. This is just a few of them. I want to point out on the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, if you can see it, CXPA, the Customer Experience Professional Association. We have a great event coming up with them March 25th. All right, where are we? Big changes, long overdue changes. 15 of the people on the left went on to become president. We are certainly hopeful that the person on the right goes on to become president of the United States. This is a dramatic change, and again, a long overdue change within our society, our community, our environment. So we see this as a very positive change as we move forward. we're seeing some things change in terms of branding, a recognition of long-standing intended or unintended structural changes in the way we present ourselves and the way we brand things. So now our syrup may come from Pearl Mining Company. Whether that's the right brand name or not, we'll discuss that at our customer centricity event next month. Regardless of how you feel about that, you've got to think people are finally starting to get it. They may have had the blind sides on for a long time, but now they're starting to get why this change is so needed and overdue. We're also looking at things differently. The vaccination is rolling out across an additional 100 sites across the country right now. Where are those sites located? Are they located in sites where in disadvantaged communities, where it's accessible to people? Or are we screening them off in inaccessible ways? Here's Los Angeles. Well, that's great. That's cars. Not everyone has a car. Disadvantaged communities have a very low percentage of automobile usage. So how do you reach those people? So again, location, location, location. These structural and design features we've talked about in the way we do business, the way we reach our community have to be rethought. We do know this. There is a return on DEI. There's a tangible return we can do, and that is when companies invest in diversity and inclusion, they're in a better position to create more adaptive, effective teams, and they're more likely to recognize diversity as a competitive advantage. Companies in the top quartile, this is from McKinsey, companies in the top quartile for both gender and ethnic diversity are 12% more likely to outperform all the other companies in the data set across all industry verticals. This is out of a big study McKinsey did just this past May. Secondly, however, the challenge for all of us is this: the overall sentiment on diversity was 52% positive and 31% negative. The sentiment on inclusion was markedly worse at only 29% positive and 61% negative. That's the challenge. So what that means is inclusion matters. Even when companies are more diverse, they may appear to be unable to cultivate work environments that are inclusive. So where's our disconnect? Diversity does not guarantee inclusion. It does not guarantee inclusion. Companies need to make a concerted effort right now to make sure they're being consistent and credible, where they're promoting equality, fairness, and openness to reap the full benefits of diversity. That's what it's all about. So we're going to examine this from 4 lenses in our breakout rooms. Number 1, winning the war for talent. Number 2, improving the quality of our decision-making. Number 3, increasing customer insight and innovation. And then finally, how do we drive employee motivation, inspiration, and satisfaction? And by the way, with all of this, we of course are going to get the numbers. We're of course going to improve our brand equity. All right, so let's start off with having Dr. Anita really share a true to life story, a case study in her interview here with Will and Derek. So I'm going to turn this over, Jason, to you and to Anita, and we look forward to your conversation here.
Thank you, Scott. Good day, everyone. My name is Dr. Anita Polite Wilson. I am the founder and CEO of Dr. Anita Enterprises Incorporated, and I am an executive coach and team dynamic strategist, helping leaders and teams navigate complexity and change specific to diversity, inclusion, and belonging. And Scott, I want to thank you for inviting me to participate. I always appreciate the opportunity to have even a small part in the work that you're doing in the diversity inclusion space. Last week, as I was thinking about how I would introduce our guests, I came across a quote that reads like this: leadership is all about taking people on a journey. The challenge is that most of the time, we are asking people to follow us to places we ourselves have never been. I found that to be appropriate because I always refer to my work as a diversity, inclusion, and belonging consultant as being on a journey. And I found that many executive leaders haven't yet taken that first step in their own personal journey before they ask the people they lead to follow in their footsteps in the workplace. But that, fortunately, hasn't been the case with our guests, Mr. Will Rarick, President and CEO of Rarick Pacific Company, and Mr. Derek Fields, the Senior Vice President of Sales and Marketing at Rarick. They, along with the entire leadership team, which includes Ms. Rory Barron, Mr. Raj Luhar, Mr. Jeff Henches, and Mr. Pete Jackson, they have personally put in the work as an executive leadership team in preparation to usher in a new era of diversity, inclusion, and belonging at Rares. Gentlemen, welcome. And I'm going to start with Will. Will, you are leading a 108-year-old family business that has historically been majority white male dominated. And you are also ushering in a new era at the company by focusing on a sense of belonging for Black employees in particular. How did you get here personally?
It was a combination. One, I want to say thank you to Dr. Anita because it's been a pleasure to work with her. And it's been awesome the last, I don't know, 4 or 5 months getting to learn with her, learn from her, and just be with her. So it's been great with that. In answering the question, I think a lot of it really came around to the George Floyd killing. And the experience that I got from talking to Derek about it really had a huge shift in how I think about this. Through Derek, I saw the powerlessness that so many people experience, and it made me think, what can I do about that? When I then took a look around my own company and saw the opportunity to really better engage people. I could see a lack of engagement among the Black employees that we have. And I thought, okay, that's not who we are or want to be as a company. Our value is family, it's growth, it's service. And honoring those values, if we're not doing a good job with our Black employees, we're not truly honoring those values. And we're not getting the full benefit of those people. And so that's really kind of what shifted in my mind.
And I know that you mean that from the heart. Too often, CEOs and executives talk the talk, but they don't necessarily walk the walk for whatever reason. And Will, I can truly say, based on the interactions that we've had and the relationship that we're developing, you truly walk the talk. And even though your name is on the wall, so to speak, what, if any, concerns do you have about the possible reactions of your peer CEOs that lead a similarly white male-dominated workforce?
It's funny because I wouldn't necessarily label it a concern, but it is something I've thought about. And in as much as a concern, it's some people won't understand, and I'm just going to be okay with that. For those that will understand, it's going to be an awesome journeying with them as well, and seeing the results that all of us can generate, and hopefully one day everyone will understand. But it's really, the concern is that I'm just going to have to move forward without some people, and that would be okay. It's really about what can I do in what I see as the right way to do things and what my vision is.
What you've just said pretty much ties back to the quote that I shared, in that people have to take this personal journey first. And I love how you said it depends on whether or not they'll understand. And again, clearly you understand. Derek, this next question is for you. In the short time that you've been with the company, you've been known for shaking things up a bit and bringing in several outstanding leaders who just happen to be Black. What impact do you think that's having on the legacy employees who've been with the company for a number of years?
Well, first and foremost, I'm going to agree with Will and just thank you, Dr. Anita, for all the work you've done with Barrett Pacific. Not only have you challenged us, you've brought us closer together as a leadership team. And I think that's been really, really huge for us. In terms of your question and the impact, I mean, it really started with Will by him bringing me into the organization and, challenging the status quo of what it's looked like in his hierarchy in terms of his leadership team. And it's just been really exciting for him to have empowered me to make some of the changes that I have in this organization. We're doing much better from a synergy perspective, much better from a collaboration perspective. I think time will tell on my new leaders. I've brought in a few new leaders over the past several months in hierarchy positions, VP positions, and director positions, and we're already starting to see the fruits of the labor of that impact. And I think it's exciting because not only do we have new leaders, but there's some tie-in with some of our legacy people because we are such a great family that's benefiting Rare Pacific.
And I understand that some of the people that you mentor don't necessarily look like you. How did that come about?
Well, at Rare Pacific in general, I mean, I'd have to give all of that credit to Will and our SVP of Human Capital, Rory Barron, for putting that together. And that's been the exciting piece for me. So not only am I getting the chance to mentor people who don't look like me, it's the opportunity to build that family at Rare Pacific that Will talks about and our value. And I think that's going to be the exciting thing moving down into the future, Dr. Nita, as we progress with this cultural club that we built at Rarick and this ERG that's going to show us that you don't only have to look at somebody that's the same color as you to be your mentor. We're family here at Rarick Pacific, and we're going to always support our family, regardless if you're Black or white.
That's right. That's right. Some of the roles that we mentioned that are going to be popping up are the roles of a pioneer, a champion, an influencer, hesitators, and obstructors. And the hesitators and obstructors are not necessarily intentional in being in the way. Some of it has to do with, where do I fit in? Do I still have a voice? So my next question for you, Derek, is do you anticipate the need to overcome an enthusiasm gap for pursuing diversity, inclusion, and belonging for everyone in the company?
Yeah, I mean, Dr. Nita, I think anytime you're going to go through change, and this will be a big change for the organization, you're going to see that impact. But I got to tell you, being part of this company and the leadership behind Will Rarick and the things that we do and the values that we have in this organization, there's no doubt in my mind we're going to overcome any challenges that come upon us because that's just who we are. That's who this company is. 108 years old today, and it's not going to stop us on the mission and vision that he has and that this leadership team has for what we need to do.
Thank you for that. This last question is for the both of you. How do you and the leadership team deliver the message that inclusion means everyone without inadvertently alienating the historically majority white male population while you intentionally focus on the Black employees first?
No, I'll go first. I think it really comes down to it really is a benefit for everyone. And if we have a value of family that we do, how could you not want to have better engagement, closer relationships, better working environment? And that means everybody gets to come together and enjoy that. It's not that one particular group gets an advantage to another. It's that everybody is together, and it kind of speaks to part of this conference here is inclusion. It's everybody included, and that's really the way I think about it.
Yeah, Dr. Anita, when I got here 2.5 years ago, one of the things that I saw that was very exciting about this organization is how, to Will's point, how we bring people together. But in part of driving our vision into the organization, the leadership team actually got out to all the plants and all of our reverse logistics centers to speak to our people about the vision. And I just imagine it being very similar, driving that same message to those teams. I got to tell you how exciting it was for our teams to hear and see the leadership team out there doing what we were doing. And I think it's the same formula for us moving forward with this whole inclusion at Rare Pacific. I'm excited, if you can't tell.
I'm excited too. And true to form, I have a pop question for each of you. What is the one message that you would like to leave with leaders who are like you at the beginning of their diversity, inclusion, and belonging journey? And you can decide who goes first.
I'll go first, Will. I'm going to use the word trust because I think as a group, you've got to hold each other accountable and trust that each one of you are going to do that. And I think that's been the great thing about working with Dr. Anita and our teams is what we've built, and being able to build that trust first has allowed us to develop and advanced where we are today.
Yeah, and if I boil it down to one word like Derek, I'd boil it down to faith. And it really comes to having that faith in the future that is better. And I'm not sure exactly what's going to happen along the way, but there's definitely a process. There's some things to go through. And knowing that whatever happens in that meantime, that future is what I'm driving at. And that faith in that future is the way I look at it.
Well, I have no doubt that you're going to get there because I know you're a man who gets what you want. And I'm looking forward to working with you both. I want to publicly thank you both for inviting me to support the leadership team on the journey as your consultant and success partner. It's a true honor and delight to work with an executive team that really and truly personally has put in the work to reinforce the sense of belonging at the very top of the organization by role modeling the inclusive behaviors you expect to see throughout the organization. And with that, let's share a little bit of how your journey began with our audience, as told in this moving video produced by your amazing creative team, who are Miles Bohannon, Shannon Sackett, and Blanca Nunez. The summer of 2020 was an inflection point everywhere. The Rarick Pacific family was not immune. Inspired to create change, leadership began taking steps to face and finally address a reality we've known for too long. We began meeting weekly to explore what it truly means to belong and how to create a culture that would connect everyone. But do you know how long it took me to get there? Because I was masking behind what it means to be a Black woman. We are doing the work, creating safe spaces, talking to each other about the pain and the feelings that hold us back in work and in life, overcoming our own programmed hesitancy and engaging each other. We are realizing what it means to belong at Rarick Pacific, to be included, to be heard.
To belong to me
We
is
work towards a common goal.
every department has a big role.
Leading by example.
We're listening across the organization and gaining a clearer vision for the future of our company, one where every member of this family knows and feels that they belong to. Rarick Pacific Company, I, you, we belong here.
Scott, we can't hear you.
Thanks again, Nita, for you and Derek and Will sharing this story. And by the way, for the audience, this whole presentation will be posted on our YouTube channel, the EEP YouTube channel, after the event. By the way, you also have, most of you were sent the bios of all the speakers today. You'll be sent a copy of those bios again post-session, so you have a chance to reach out and connect with these people later. And again, Anita, thanks so much for that overview and that terrific interview. We look forward to hearing from you as we move on here. Jason, let's take a look at the setup here for our breakout rooms.
It's coming up. Go ahead and get started and we'll have it on the screen in a moment.
All right, sounds good. All right, so we're going to go into the breakout rooms now, the 4 breakout rooms. You're being pre-assigned to those 4 breakout rooms. Again, going along with our rule of thumb in the Zoom environment these days, if you find yourself in somewhere else, just log back into the original Zoom link and we'll put you in the breakout room. The breakouts will take about 12 minutes. These are the audience collaboration questions we're going to be looking at again. Firstly, Stacey Gordon will facilitate the discussion around the war for talent. And the question is, what programs have you supported or created to create diverse pools of talent in your organization? Dr. Brown will facilitate the quality of decision-making discussion. And that question is, what are the key leadership and team effectiveness traits that need to be improved upon? Enrique will facilitate the dialogue around increasing insight and innovation. And the question there is, how can we better leverage the strength of our diversity at our organizations to better understand customers and improve our value proposition? And then finally, the 4th breakout will be driving employee inspiration, motivation, and satisfaction. And that's led by Michelle. The question there is, how do we overcome the enthusiasm gap and tangibly engage our workforce for measurable DEI results? Enthusiasm refers to, and many of you have been here, diversity initiatives many times in the past have been launched and quickly lose momentum for a variety of reasons. How do we overcome that? So those are our 4 questions. We'll throw up the guidelines here, Jason, if you would, one more time. I think it's the next slide. There are 4 facilitators, and then finally the guidelines again. And when you're in this breakout room, for now, once you get in the breakout room, then you can reveal yourself via your video. Again, as you have a question, just raise your hand, or if you want to make a comment, you can also use the chat feature. Your facilitator will kind of set up the dialogue, and we look forward to you having a very robust conversation with an aim toward what are the next practices? What are practical, realistic things we can do to answer each of those 4 questions that are in the breakout room? Again, we look forward to your conversation, and we look forward to hearing the results of your dialogue here in about 12, 13 minutes or so. So Jason, with that, let's go ahead and have people, if you'll go ahead and trigger them into the breakout rooms. Thanks much.
and leveraging the ideas. All right, back to the main session.
Okay, we're waiting for people to rejoin us from the main session. Jason, if you'll give me a head count, we'll move on with the panelists.
You're good to go. Everyone's here.
Okay, great. Welcome back, everybody. Well, I'm anxious to hear what you had to say. So let's start off with the talent breakout, the session, the talent breakout room, if we will. And Stacy, can you kind of summarize what the team talked about there? Stacy Gordon?
I sure can. Thank you. So we had the question around talent and around what are people doing, and we actually we're ending it right at the moment. We were talking about what are the things that we really have to ensure that people are looking at, right, when they're making these decisions. And part of it was the idea that we are not supposed to be just focusing in on talent acquisition and on the recruiters, because they're not the ones that actually do the hiring. The hiring managers do. So the hiring managers are the ones that we need to be paying attention to. The hiring managers are the ones who need to get this training. Recruiters need it too, but they're already ahead of the game. They're already going, yeah, we know this, right? The struggle they have is in how to get the hiring manager to do the thing that they need to do, because they can hide behind, you know, saying, oh, they weren't a good fit or they didn't have enough experience. So using standards, getting scorecards, metrics, and making the hiring manager actually give real reasons as to why a person wasn't a good fit, rather than just skating by with wasn't a good fit, right? And putting it in writing. We also talked about, you know, do people really want diversity? So starting with that first, because if they don't actually have been bought into the idea that this is something that needs to happen, then the efforts that come behind that are going to be just as lackluster, because there is no real buy-in. So you've got to get the buy-in to that process. And then we also just talked about the fact that you got to start somewhere. You might have to do this in phases. And no two companies are going to be able to do this the same way. Different sizes, different budgets, different, you know, size of recruiters and teams. So it is important that you look at what you can do with what you've got, maybe go to where the talent is. But again, it goes back to that idea that you are ready to invest if you really want to do the thing, right? So it goes back to, do you want to do the thing? Do you really want diversity? And I think that's a question that everybody has to answer.
No, that's great comments. And again, as we continue on here, those of you who are in that breakout room and others who are not, please feel free to use the chat feature or chime in with your comments here as the session moves on. Stacy, thanks for leading it. By the way, Stacy, can you put in the chat comment section? I know you have a terrific assessment tool, how they can reach out to you.
Yes,
great.
thank you. I will drop that in there. We do a DEI assessment that kind of walks you through, figures out where you are in that framework, right? From awareness to advocacy along that DEI journey.
That's great. Thanks again. Thanks for participating and supporting us, Stacy. Let's move on to the other breakout room. Dr. Brown, are you there? Dr. Gina Brown?
I am here. We had a very amazing room. It was cut kind of short. We were really just getting into it. But again, one of the big key understandings from our space when we talk about decision making as a whole and diverse, equitable, and inclusive is that we have to understand the critical aspect of psychological safety. And using that as that lens we begin to look at, it's really much so the umbrella and how we invite these conversations and we construct the space to really create one that's actually inclusive and equitable. And as we, discuss diversity, we wanted to expand that to mean that we're not just talking about racial diversity. We're talking about diversity of thought and practices, ideas, and inputs all across the board to do that. The key traits that would need to be present to be able to do that with fidelity, I would say, is having engagement. And that when you have leadership involved, it's not as the observer, but it's also as the participant, and do that. And so what that does is that really creates the space of vulnerability so that everyone, again, is in it. And together we can actually see how we're working through that. Being able to and willing to look at the data was really huge. And so that these are data-driven decision-making. And we talk about data, qualitative and quantitative data, to do that as we're doing that, so that it doesn't feel so woo-woo, which sometimes when we talk about organizations, it's just a feeling mode. No, here's the data that actually goes with it to be able to do that. And again, when we have that data and we have that construct and we have leadership that's actually involved, and then we can begin to look at the voice of the customer. When we talk about the customer, it's the inclusion of the employees as the customer also of the organization. And so forming things like ERGs to be able to make sure that the employee brand, the audio and the video actually matches, and that the key stakeholders are involved. And you can do certain things like gap analysis, cross-functionals. And one question I threw out, which wasn't part of the original, but those that know me know I throw stuff out there, is that I had asked the question in regards to when you're looking at your core values and having an understanding of your core values, what happens if your core values aren't even aligned to today's current practices, because your core values, because of when they were created, really contain institutional biases? Then what? Then what do you do? How do you then begin to look at that? So you have to kind of take that into consideration when you are bringing groups together. And again, going back to what I started with, is having an environment where you build psychological safety in, and you understand that when people are coming, they truly are bringing their truth, which might not resonate exactly to yours. And so being very clear with that and understanding that will allow you to begin to move forward and not just really be about the climate of the organization, because the temperature can change day to day, but building a solid culture that you begin to build off of. So that's kind of the nuts and the bolts of what we got a chance to talk about in decision.
Yeah, that sounds like your group also really had a terrific running dialogue. And thanks for that. Again, those of you who were not in that breakout room, feel free to share your comments as well as we continue to go on. By the way, Dr. Brown and Stacy, if you would summarize your breakout room comments and just email them to me, we will package them with a post-session report to everyone that participated today, so that you have a benefit of seeing all the ideas in writing that we came up with. Thanks again, Dr. Brown. We'll be chatting with you shortly. And let's bring up Enrique, who had the Customer Insight breakout room.
All right, thank you, Scott. Yeah, we had a great group, and they gave 4 great examples that I think really hit 4 interesting themes. So the first being that in your organizations, to kind of leverage what Dina said, does your organization represent enough diversity that people engage with your organization so that they feel less sense isolation, so that they don't hesitate? A great example was a law firm that was able to engage in people that had concerns about racial and sexual harassment and inequities, and being able to talk to people in that law firm that they could relate to, feel comfortable with, and increase that level of engagement. So very important theme in terms of, do we have an environment where people feel comfortable, safe, customers feel that they can engage? Second was really around representation at a broad level. Who do you invite? Who do you bring in to key meetings, to conferences, folks that are a strategic part of your organization that maybe have never thought about being represented, about engaging with the customer, that has a great story to tell. And we talked about those stories, and we probably have a lot of stories from our employees and our organization that are there that we haven't thought about sharing, and yet they have a great impact in terms of our customers. We also spoke about the community and reminding ourselves that our customers are out there in the community as well. And so are we equipped with the stories to tell them about our organization and about how the organizations are making an impact in the community? Keep in mind that our customers are going to be asking us, tell us about your diversity and inclusion initiative. Tell us about the representation that you have in your organization. Tell us about how we can make an impact, you know, in your organization. That's sort of that mutual, you know, push-pull that they're looking for. And finally, was really just in the employment side, that again, those that are looking for work are looking at our websites, are talking to our employees, and they are customers as well. And that as customers, they're looking for work, but they again want to make that connection with the brands that they see that are out there.
Yeah, great comments. And again, this whole realm of the customer impacts this also bleeds in, of course, to employer branding, as you've mentioned, is an incredible part of this overall question we have before us. Again, the common comment from both employees and job candidates was, sure, the company says it's for diversity, but once we got in, we found that it wasn't quite real when it comes down to the actual inclusive policy practices and then the way they lead. So again, thanks for those comments, Enrique, and thanks for the team. I'm sure a few of you who are not in that room will also have some comments, so please use the chat or raise your hand there as we keep going. Thanks, Enrique. And Michelle, let's go to you because you considered the idea of how do we inspire, motivate, engage our folks.
Exactly. And we also had great conversation. You know, always we could use more time, but we had really great conversation. So we had 6 categories. I kind of came up with 6 categories for us to just have a framework to work within. And so the first one was awareness. And you know what? What's our why? First of all, what's our why? Like we said, what's going to be the benefit? And we have to understand before we can even be compassionate and empathetic with others, we have to assess how we are feeling a lot about the subject of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. So really being in touch with that and having an awareness and having the company understand where they are, have each person, not only the leaders, but each person assess their own awareness and really understand their why. And the second one was about establishing trust. And we know that's a big factor. And one person talked about in order to be able to create a safe space and make sure the dialogue is always positive, that they have ground rules that you cannot talk with somebody if you don't follow these ground rules. So there's no question about what's accepted and what's not accepted. So the ground rules really helps to create that safe space and to really be able to establish and sustain that trust. The third area was accountability. And you know, one of the person said, well, one of the things that we really want to suggest is that you publish the there. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Like, okay, yeah. It's easy to look around the room and see the differences, but let's talk about accountability. So let's publish the statistics and then let's track them and see. And the way you did it, Scott, a few years ago, here's where we were with the number of women. Now we're here. So being able to publish those statistics. And then the fourth one was communication. One person who actually works at RERIC said they have a calendar, which is awesome because they can show what different ethnic groups are celebrating. I mean, everybody knows that February is Black History Month. What happens in March? What happens in September? So being able to have a calendar and communicate all the things that people can come together about. And then who to communicate with. Another person said, we want to make sure that it's not just top down and they know that someone else went in the community and did something active. So they ask them, can you share that with the group? That way it's recognition, motivation, and incentive for everyone, and a way to help people understand that they really are in it together. And sometimes they even invite people to lead discussions on certain things. So then the next one was leadership, and it all starts at the leadership. One person talked about, you know, it shouldn't just be a program. It shouldn't be just one opportunity. It really should be part of the culture. It really is important for diversity, equity, inclusion to be part of the culture, and that it be visible with words and actions. And that one person said too, that we have to really involve group that, you know what, it doesn't always have to have a budget attached. They have a sponsorship program. So they match mentors with other people and help them learn to grow, collaborate, and become and increase their performance and become more identified as a person with potential opportunity. So having a sponsorship program came under the leadership discussion. And then lastly, the last category was incentives so that people can stay inspired. And they said, you know what, sometimes what we do is we catch someone doing something right and we highlight them, we feature them as doing something right. along the areas of diversity, equity, inclusion, and anything else. So we're catching people do something right. So it was a very interactive group. We had a lot of good ideas, and I think everybody recognized the importance of continuing to involve people, keep it active, keep it ongoing, because it's not just a one-time check the box kind of program.
Oh, fantastic. And again, terrific comments. Again, it's all about keeping it real. This is also, just as a side note, you talk about some of our policies and practices. Really, it's a time to really audit everything we're doing, both in terms of our formal communications as well as informal communications. So again, Michelle, thanks again. I'm sure I know your group was also highly engaged, so we look forward to hearing from comments for others that were perhaps not in that breakout room. So let's go on now to our bonus round, and that is we've assembled the 6 top DEI thought leaders to share what they've come up with in terms of next practices, strategies that work, initiatives that work. And let's start now with Mark Spring. Mark, I'm not going to go into an elaborate introduction. Again, the audience has your complete bio, but we're delighted you're able to join us to kind of give us this external perspective from a regulatory standpoint, from a overall change standpoint. So Mark, I'm going to turn it right on over to you. Thanks.
Thanks, Scott. I appreciate that very much. And yes, I'll just say that I'm with a law firm, CDF Labor Law, that specializes in labor and employment law, representing employers of all sizes in California. And I work out of I used to work out of the Sacramento and San Francisco offices. Now I mostly work out of my home, like many of us. And what I want to talk about today is a little bit about our journey and a little bit about where we're currently stuck and moving forward. So my firm has almost 40 attorneys. From a numbers perspective, we've done an excellent job, I think, both by our own assessment and by those that look at this in our industry in terms of our numbers, particularly on the women's side. We're 62% of our attorneys are women. 53% of our partners are women. On the ethnic diversity side, we're doing pretty well given the total scope of our industry. We have 28% of our attorneys are ethnically diverse, 23% of our partners, and 20% of our executive committee. And our managing partner of the firm has been a woman who has also pushed these issues, which has been very helpful. And we've won a number of awards in the industry for our diversity and recognized in that regard. And we're active in many hiring aspects and programs to get diverse college students into law schools, to get law school graduates into law firms that may be more traditionally non-diverse in our industry. Where we've run into a problem, and somebody mentioned it earlier, really is in the belonging side of it. And I think this was emphasized with the George Floyd murder and some of the other issues that have occurred. While I think numbers-wise, we've done a very good job, not only in hiring, but in retaining and promoting, I just think there's a lot more work to do on the belonging side. Different viewpoints, and I think what I would say is I see a lot of people, mostly white, many men. It's when January 6th occurred as an example, saying, you saw a lot of, this is not us, this is not America. And I think there's a lot of us that say, no, actually, the problem is this is America. This is our history, not only our history dating back hundreds of years, but individual histories for those that are ethnically diverse, those that have that are disabled, those are gay, women. They've been subjected to conduct that they can relate to some of the things we saw on January 6th and some of the things that were happening in our country over the last few months and years. While many don't recognize that and they just want to say, no, this is not really a problem. This is just isolated to the Proud Boys or to the South, but no, it's in every one of our organizations to some level, maybe hopefully not the same level. And I think the importance that we're struggling with now is to get everybody, and particularly everybody on the leadership team, to recognize that just because we've hired a lot of people, just because we've won these awards, just because we've promoted people, and just because we've retained people, the job is not done. There's a lot more to do to make sure that we really reach the potential that we can get to when it comes to the inclusion and belonging part of diversity. We have a good basis of diversity in our organization, and we're I don't want to say struggling. We're at the point now where we have to now take the next step. You know, and through our diversity committee and some of the leaders in the organization, including myself, we're trying to do that. We're working on sharing various aspects of our experiences. I'll give you one very quick one, and then I'll turn it over to somebody else. That we had a female African American attorney at our office that talked about when she was young, and even recently, people were referred to her as exotic. And many of us in the audience said, well, you know, that seems to me like a compliment. And she described how, no, it was not a compliment to be exotic. Basically, what you're doing is you're pointing out my differences. If you really think I'm attractive, then say I'm attractive. Say, don't call me exotic. And people didn't realize that was coming across in a negative tone. And actually, for many people, I think we're saying it, we're probably trying to say it in a positive way. So those types of things affect belonging, and I think that's where the work needs to be done in my organization. I think you can't rest on the numbers.
Scott, you're on mute, so I'm going to take advantage of that and say,
thank you.
Mark,
Mike, go ahead.
Scott, I just want to say this. Mark,
Please.
Thank you for your courage to say what you said about January 6th. I have often thought that people need to realize it's not the external other, it's the internal other that we need to watch out for as well. So thank you for having the courage to say that.
Yeah, it's great, again, Mark, that you brought that up. And also you mentioned some other things in terms of both language and some of the covert things that happen within organizations we need to bring to light. Again, you surface some of those areas that really are going to require a lot of work. We're not there yet. We got a long way to go, making progress, but still a long way to go. And again, thanks, Mark, for your contributions, and please hang with us. And as we move forward here, I want to introduce now Talarius Heron, TK Heron, who's our corporate neighbor. And thanks again, TK, for being a title sponsor today and supporting all that we're doing here. So I'll turn it over to you, TK. Thanks.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for the great work that ENP continues to do for the community here. As Mark said, my name is Talarius Heron. I go by TK, and I'm the Vice President of Inclusion and Diversity Programs at Medtronic. And you know, our task, you know, the question that we received as fellow panelists is, what's working in your organizations, in our organizations, from diversity inclusion, and any advice? And so I want to start with what's working for us. You know, as the global leader in med tech and med devices, you know, we've been on this journey, but we're not perfect at all by any means. You know, we're still learning, we're still evolving. And I think there's three key pieces that I would highlight since I've been in this role. One is our senior leaders, and this has come up in conversation already, by our senior leaders' engagement, but more importantly, sponsorship of the work of I&D, and understanding the why we do it for the business and for our employees, for our communities. So number one, we have genuine engagement. I can give you a perfect example. You know, our current CEO that stepped into the role last year, you know, before being a CEO, he was the executive sponsor for our African descent or Black ERG group. And, you know, him being part of the executive sponsor, you know, the employees part of this employee resource group know the CEO well, engaged. We have annual barbecues at his house, but he also got in and did the work with us and alongside us as a community within Medtronic. And so I think that senior level executive sponsorship and engagement is important. And I think at Medtronic, we do it well. Now, again, there's definitely always opportunities to understand where people are on their journeys, but I would highlight that as one. The second one I would highlight, as I kind of referenced, is that we've been on this journey for over 30 years, specifically in the space of D&I. Our first ERG was our, it was called Focus. And it was our administrative and secretaries that got together as a community over 35 years and said, we have shared interests and skills that we can come together, share best practices, think about efficiencies for the organization. And then from there, added additional groups from women's to our ethnic groups to faith-based groups. And so this would be the second point I would say that we're doing well and that we really leverage, and that's our employee resource groups. We have over 20,000 employees involved in our networks across, not just in the US, but across the world, over 200 to 200 chapters. And the value that those networks and employee resource groups provide, we talk about voice of customer. What is the voice in I would say sensing of the particular community to lift up issues, challenges, opportunities, whether it's their own experience within the organization as an employee or as they're bringing forth new ideas for our products. And so we really lean into those groups and very active funding and engagement across the board. The third area I would say that we do well, and it's a great example to share, is around our diversity recruiting. So we talk about, talent acquisition, bringing in new talent, and knowing that we don't rest on just acquisition, but what about retention and development? But I really want to talk about what we do well in terms of recruiting, because we've seen the headlines, right, of some organizations and some high profile leaders saying, well, where's the talent? They don't exist. That's othering language. They don't exist. Where do I find them? But what I think Medtronic does well is our intentional efforts around diverse recruiting. So we participate in quite a few diversity career fairs, whether that's SHIP, Society of Hispanic Professionals in Engineering, National Black MBA, National Sales Network, if you're not familiar with National Sales Network, but mostly primarily Black sales leaders. Another one that a lot of people don't know of is American Indian Science and Engineering Society, AISES. When you think about the American Indian population and experience in this country, a lot of people don't realize, you talk about equity, diversity, inclusion, who's involved. That's another area, recruiting there and bringing those talents, especially if you're in the tech field. Again, SWENET, Society of Women Engineers. So we're very intentionally where we show up and recruit from and hire. So I think that's the third practice that would highlight. When I think about, what I would leave with you in opportunities. So I would highlight opportunity for us in our journey. Yes, we have great sponsorship and support from our senior leaders. And this came up in a dialogue and conversation earlier too, is that what about those managers? The day-to-day engagement impact that the managers have on employees, their experience in an organization. And so when we think about and we say diversity inclusion is for all and by all, how are we bringing along managers who think it may be optional, opt out, who's going to hold me accountable? And so moving beyond what a lot of organizations have said, we're going to do training, we're going to do unconscious bias training, so on and so forth. I think those are baseline, but we're really trying to say, how do we elevate this aspect that the managers, and we have 10,000 managers across the world, how do they lean in this work and lead it? And it's natural, they believe in it, it's passionate, and it starts with experiences, it starts with storing, but it also talks and lead into accountability. So we're working on that. So advice I would give, I as I get older, I'm not going to call anyone out on part of this time, but I'm having trouble seeing and remembering, I have to have acronyms. So I'm going to give you one of my acronyms to leave with you, and it's APP, because we have apps for everything. And so instead of APP, I'm going to say it's AAPP. So the first A is authenticity, being you. And someone said this earlier, starting where you're at and not trying to be someone else, not trying to be, saying that because someone else is doing a scholarship program, we need to do a scholarship program. Where are you at in your organization, the resources of your community that's going to make an impact on you, that's going to be authentic for your culture? So authenticity is one. The second one is accountability, and you can switch those two, accountability, then authenticity, but accountability, this piece of saying that is everyone on board? And are you going to hold people accountable? Are there consequences? There's one thing to say where you're accountable for, but accountable for into what? What are the consequences? So what is the accountability for us? You know, we put out there, it's on our website, it was on our LinkedIn and Twitter, around accountability that we're linking to our leaders and managers, where we say compensation, but also career progression. Because we heard from our employees to say, we have managers that are maybe opting out or may decide they may not be engaged, but they're still getting promoted. So there's what you talk about consequences. So we're on this journey about holding people accountable. The P, prioritizing, not trying to do everything all at once and trying to follow the crowd. And again, this kind of links back to being authentic. It's like, what are the 2 or 3 things that you can prioritize and really show some movement, success, and sustainability at, so it doesn't become a flavor of a month? And this gets back to the authenticity as well. And the last one is partnerships. Don't do it alone. Don't go it alone. Don't reinvent the wheel. I'll give you a perfect example of one of the partnerships that we brought to the table. We were engaged in 2 HBCUs. We talk about Black talent opportunities. And we're saying, hey, how do we accelerate our engagement with historical Black colleges? Well, you know what? There's Thurgood Marshall College Fund out there who has access to over 200,000 students plus. They have a scholarship fund. They have access to these students. Why would we not partner with them? Because they already have the relationships. They know the students. You just need to come in and say, this is what we're thinking. Here's what we're struggling with. These are our challenges. What would you recommend to us? That would cut out a lot of the trial and error, but also they have the brand and the relationships to make things happen. So that's just an example of a partnership. So accountability, authenticity, prioritizing, and partnerships. So thank you. Hopefully that's helpful.
Fantastic, TK. Thanks so much. That's certainly memorable. And thanks again for your contributions and all you do for the community. And we hope to see you back in the neighborhood live sooner than later. But again, thanks again, and look forward to talking to you later. Again, let's now bring up Rhonda Bolton. And Rhonda is a former congressional policy advisor. She's been head of diversity and social responsibility of a Fortune 100 affiliate. And Rhonda's been recognized for her extensive experience in designing and implementing effective, pragmatic DEI strategies. So Rhonda, thanks for joining us this morning. So I'll turn it over to you for your reflections.
Okay, thank you so much for having me. You know, one of the things that I wanted to share now that I am working with several different organizations as a consultant is, you know, what I've been hearing over the last 6 to 8 months, especially in light of what happened this summer with the killing of George Floyd, and, you know, this reckoning and introspection that a lot of leaders and organizations are going through at this point. And especially if the organization, you know, put out some type of statement back in the summer about social justice or racial inequality, you know, but they don't have an established DEI initiative. The question that they ask is, okay, so we put this statement out, now what do we do? Because we don't know what the next step is. Or, you know, we have a few, you know, programs here or there, you know, we do some recruiting here, or, you know, we have a partnership there, but it doesn't seem like we are going anywhere, or we don't feel like we're accomplishing what it is we need to accomplish. And so my question is this, you know, I've heard a lot of folks say today that, you know, diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace, that's a journey and not, you know, a thing or a program or even a destination. It's just a continual journey. And that is so, so true. So the question is, how often do you say that you are going to go on a journey, or you want to head in a particular direction, but you have no roadmap or no guide or no guide? And so, you know, that's the issue for organizations if they are experiencing, you know, this feeling of confusion, or, you know, just feeling like they're ineffective in their DEI initiatives. And so the process that I go through with organizational leadership is literally asking about, the vision. What is your vision? Let's talk about that and go through a process of ideation to come up with that, because that is the starting point for what I literally describe as a roadmap. So for example, if you're a consumer products company, your vision may be that we want to, have continual innovation in product design. And then the next thing would be, well, what is your mission, as it pertains to DEI? And the mission may be, well, we want to, leverage diversity, equity, and inclusion to help drive this innovation that we are seeking. So that's another, I guess, kind of like signpost on the roadmap. And then after that, well, then you start talking about your strategy. And it's that strategic plan that's kind of, the foundation for a DEI initiative that's going to be effective. And, it's going to help you reach some concrete goals. And so again, in the example that I'm sharing, if someone wants to, innovation is what they're in pursuit of, and they want to figure out how to leverage diversity, equity, and inclusion to help them accomplish that. Okay, so what strategies are you going to employ? It could be, hey, we're going to utilize our ERGs in a different way to help us, collect those diverse perspectives and apply those so that we are being more innovative. We have access to more different and unique types of ideas, and you continue to move along from there. But it's this, it's a journey, it's this process, and it is thinking strategically. I also like to say, in what other respect of our business do we, assign someone to an important initiative who may not be an expert in the area, and a lot of folks are on diversity committees in their workplace. And, that's really great, but, those people may not all be experts in DEI practice. They're coming to it because it's important to them and they're passionate about it. But as a leader, how often do you take an important initiative and hand it to a group of volunteers? You don't give them extra time to accomplish whatever it is you want to accomplish. They don't have extra resources to do it, but it's like, here it is, do it. And, I expect it to be effective and I expect it to see results. So my, kind of point with all of that is DEI needs to be treated like any other important, business strategy or imperative that we are pursuing. So I'll pause right there and turn it over to somebody else.
Rhonda, thanks again for your comments. I think you started out with something by saying it's a journey, it's not a destination. And that's certainly more true than ever. In fact, when we looked at this forum, we said, we can't accomplish everything in one forum. So we're going to at least make this a series this year. So we'll return to this topic in the summer and also this fall, because again, we need to really go deep and wide with the topic. But again, thank you for your time and energy in joining us today. We're going to look forward to seeing and hearing from you many times in the future. Let's go now to Jim Anderson. And Jim is president and CEO of the California Association of Executives. It's a 1,300 member association that is the association of associations primarily for nonprofits. Jim, we're delighted to have you part of the conversation today. Please share what.
Yeah, Scott, thanks for having me. And Michelle, thanks for the invitation. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. You can never assume anything with Zoom. Well, so I just want to maybe summarize our story a little bit and some of the insights that I've had. And kind of like my story is similar to Will's, in that I've always felt I've been personally supportive of the issues around DEI. But when George Floyd died, and that really had an impact on me personally. And so, yes, as Rhonda had just mentioned, we put out a statement, and I didn't necessarily have a roadmap on what to do next. But it's at the same time, two of my board members that were new to the organization and new to the board We're having conversations with my board chair because he was reaching out to them to welcome them. And of the 3 that were coming on the board, 2 raised the issues about, well, what is Calisae doing? And from that really gave us not only permission, but almost the mandate to really dive into this issue. And so I want to tell you a little bit about the journey that we've been on and a couple lessons that we've learned so far, because we're just getting started out. Number 1, the board has made this a priority. They are having specific dedicated meetings exclusively about this subject and only about this subject and only with the board members and with the trained facilitator. Because sometimes these conversations get awkward. People aren't used to talking about some of these issues, and it takes some vulnerability. And I think, as my board chair said after one meeting, when it gets awkward, it's getting real. And that's a good thing, because there's a lot of trust with our group because they've known each other for a long time. We're a professional society with members, and we've had members for many, many years. And those folks are the professional staff of other associations, right? So Talarius mentioned American Indian Engineering Society. That's an association. They have professional staff. Those are my members. And so for me, we have an opportunity, I think, that's unique in how do we influence their thinking and where they want to go, right? Because these organizations have also, for a lot of them, have raised their awareness and they want to do more. And they look to Calisae in my organization, well, what are you doing? Because we want to replicate it. They look to us for those kind of things. So what we've been trying to do is what I would refer to as building an infrastructure for the future. Because for me, the focus is on leadership and culture. And that takes years to change. And it doesn't happen overnight. So we've been polling our members, we polled our board, we have data to bring to this issue. And I'll just give you some of the insights I found out about, because I think people personally believe they are supportive and want to be inclusive. I mean, that's what societies are all about, is bringing in people and making them feel welcome. But there's the biases that people have inherently that they might not even realize. So while a very high percentage of my members that responded to our poll said they were supportive, when you ask them other things like, well, what programs do you have in place? Or do you have a DI position statement? The numbers go way down. So the way people feel versus the actions, there's a gap. And so I think one of the things that we're trying to examine is, where do we have influence, right? And we've been talking about data, for example, and let's shine the light on some of the answers that we got. Or, for example, one thing that I'm really looking at closely is our membership does not look like California. It is predominantly white. And so what happens, we find, is people come to become an association manager because of their own network, right? So they know somebody that brings them in, they love it, and then they want to continue. And so we need to, how do we broaden that network? So we've been engaging our members, we've been focusing with the board, and now, last week, we sent out an email to, because the board approved a task force to look at DEI task force specifically to help guide the board on what it should be doing in the future. One email, I got 22 people to sign up for the task force, and most of them have done this kind of work in their own organizations. So that's kind of the point we're at right now. And I know the board also wants to develop a regular relationship with this group. So for example, I would expect one of the outcomes of this task force is to have a permanent standing DEI committee. But one of the things I've heard is where things fall down is that there's a disconnect and lack of communication and regular reporting to the board. So if there's not constant communication, like Michelle sort of implied in our breakout group, then where does the momentum go? So to me, it's all about how we're changing our culture and the influence we're trying to have with our members, because I know they've got goals and we can help them do that. But it's really just having that conversation up front with them now about what's going on and what we see. And I think that'll make a difference. So that's it in a nutshell, I guess.
Oh, that's great comments, Jim. And you're echoing several of the comments I see on the chat board about what role does DEI play in strategy? And what we're saying is, and what I'm hearing you do is you're building it in as part of your strategy. It's not something separate. It's not a separate initiative. It's not a separate program. It's the way we do business development. It's the way we operate. It's our core value system, not something separate. And a lot of the time
exactly. So in our breakout group, like, this isn't a job of HR. If management's not invested, it's not going to go as far. There's just no question about it. It's got to be a holistic effort. So that's why, for our case, the business cases, I mean, somebody already talked about innovation and getting different viewpoints and perspectives for sure. But associations, I mean, I've got association members, their organizations have been around more than 100 years. So they're in this for the long haul, and they're recognizing that what their employees and their members look like does not look like California. And that's not a long-term success story. They've got to shift that. And again, I think there's a lot of openness, not completely, but there's a lot of attention that people are paying to this, at least within my membership.
And again, I applaud your efforts, and we'll look forward to hearing your kind of an update from you as this progresses. And I'll look forward to also talking with you separately on a general basis about where the Association of Associations is going. Jim,
anytime, be happy to, Scott.
Thanks again, Jim. Let's move on now to Karen Clark, who's SVP of City National Bank. And Karen, thank you for joining us this morning. Again, the audience has your bio, but I just have to point out that Karen serves on no less than 5 nonprofit boards. She coaches and frequently speaks on developing your personal brand. And she also has, maybe you can reference this, her music, the Karen A. Clark Project. Maybe we can talk a little bit about that. But again, Karen, thanks for joining us this morning.
Yeah, thanks for having me, everybody. And just real quickly about the music. You know how when you're in first, second grade and somebody comes around for career day and they go, oh, what do you want to be when you grow up? Nobody says, I want to work for a bank. No one. I have never heard that happen. I always wanted to dance, sing, and act. And so I went to college and got an economics degree as a backup plan, but I've always danced, sang, and act. And I've been doing it my whole life. So my third CD is out. My band is the Karen A. Clark Project, sort of a jazzy spoken word grown up type of a thing. I stream shows, been streaming shows since the pandemic, and I'm actually publishing my first book this year. So yeah, I'm living my first and second grade dreams while I try to impact the world through diversity, equity, and inclusion. But what a great conversation we have been having. Yeah, so you have my bio. So what you know is that I have the pleasure of managing multicultural strategies for the company, both internally and externally, which is really electric, right? Because I'm not fighting with anybody about how we marry the strategies or how we utilize colleagues to help the company grow. But such great comments I've been listening today, and I resonate with so many of them. And one thing I want to say, and I agree with someone.
Karen, I can't hear you. Am I the only one?
Uh-oh. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Karen.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So some things that popped into my mind as we've been having this discussion is, one, things don't happen overnight. You hear people say progress takes time. We can't change overnight. And it's like, what about 400 years though? Can we change in 400 years? And so this word of intentionality, we can do anything we want with intentionality, but we live in this ecosystem. So we can have all the greatest, plans and intentions, but if you can't co-opt people and bring them along with you, then, we've got to exercise that influence muscle, right? So I've been at my company for 9 years, and my company hired me to really work with. They had wanted me to, build these resource groups. We call them colleagues because we're colleagues at City National, not employees. It's the same thing, employee resource groups. They wanted me to build these groups, and they said, build these groups, and those folks can work with you on business development, because that's really what we need you to do. Go out there and, increase our portfolio of multicultural clients. And I thought they had maybe done a little groundwork with, these resource groups. They're talking about all this in interview, and I get to the company, and the resource groups are like, there's 4 of them, and they're like, no, we didn't say we're doing any business development. We need personal and professional development. We need this, we need that. We want all the things that other employee resource groups get at other companies. And, that was fair. That was fair. And I, had to go back to the, company and say, look, we're going to get to this external piece, but we got to do something to make colleagues feel like they belong. I care about them, before we ask them to go out and care about, you know, the marketplace and our growth and success. So we have been working in those, the initial 4 resource groups in 2011 has turned into 12. And we have and we're a small company though. We're 5,000, you know, we're a national company, 5,000 across the country. But we're, you know, $80 billion bank in portfolio. We specialize in entertainment. We're a luxury brand bank, affluent, high net worth. Entertainment is one of our big verticals. Legal is one of our big verticals. We love attorneys and law firms. But because of our business model, you know, we're not a mass brand. I've worked for other banks, multicultural marketing, and you know, it's easier in a mass market to create these multicultural strategies. When you're talking about a luxury brand, affluent and influencers, you've got to have, you know, very specific strategies for those folks. And so I began cultivating these resource groups. And once we started really satisfying their needs through internal programming, then people started to feel like, oh, I really do like this company. I like what they're doing for me. I understand this company a lot better. I think other people deserve to work for a company like ours. And so then you started to have colleagues that wanted to recruit other people to come work for the bank. And eventually I got to the point about 4 years ago where I had a really strong external business development strategy in 3 specific segments. But I tell you, the other thing that comes to mind as we're talking, and I always tell people, 1, timing is everything. And 2, hashtag stay ready so that you don't have to get ready. And the great thing about my company is that from the very beginning, my executive committee was like, Karen, go forth, do your thing, let us know if you need help, right? And this is, you know, a traditionally male, you know, dominated executive committee, white males. And that is my tribe, though. I've been working with this tribe since my late 20s when I was thrust into these conference rooms of commercial real estate and construction lending. And they gave me access to the executive committee, to board of directors. And I went out and I started trying to do my work, and people, you know, let me be. And we started winning awards very quietly when Forbes came out with their first Best Places for Diversity in 2017. We were on that list. We've been on the list for the past 3 years. Hopefully we'll make it this year. Last year, we were finally on the list for Best Places for Women. And so, you know, quietly been doing this work, colleagues are engaged. And then George Floyd was murdered. And all of a sudden, this quiet work that I was doing was completely on Front Street, and the company and everybody's looking to me. Oh, so what are we doing? What's our response? What are we, you know, and they didn't realize all of the work that the colleagues had done at a grassroots level to build these resource groups, all of the rich programming, the rich digital content, the rich conversations that we had been having internally and externally. They didn't even realize, right? And so when they asked what's going on, I had a whole deck, right? And all kinds of ideas that I had been trying to push forward, but you know, people were like, yeah. And all of a sudden, it was like, yes, we need to just blow all of this out. And I was ready, right? I had just onboarded a vendor to do an unconscious bias pilot. Guess what? 2 weeks later, it did enterprise-wide, right? I was ready. I had, you know, it was all this stuff I had just done. And all of a sudden, the company was like, yes, we didn't know we had such a fantastic story. But we did. And I was telling a group of students this morning in this DEI certification class that, and you all know, this is tough work. It's such tough work. You will get tired. You will get weary. But you just gotta keep putting the work in. Keep exercising that influence muscle. You know, those Covey circles, control, influence, concern. Get out of concern. Get back into control and that circle of influence, because we have much more influence, all of us, than we realize, so much more than we realize. And I really stepped into my, you know, superpower of influence about 3 years ago. I was at a big, you know, company, but it wasn't that big. It was a very exclusive company. Then I was just, you know, fortunate to be in the room. And one of the division managers walked up to me, and I was talking to one of his direct reports. And the division manager walked right in and butted in our conversation. He said,
Don't talk to her. She's going to talk you into something that you don't have time for. And I said, well, dang, tell us how you really feel. And he said, that's how I feel. Don't talk to her. You don't have time for anything that she's about to talk you into. And first I started getting a little ticked, and then I'm like, whoa, that's my reputation, that I can talk people into things they don't have time for. I'll take it. I will take it. And so I say that to say we have so much more influence than we realize. And when you get tired, just remember, you've done your groundwork, you've got the passion, you've got the commitment, and there is somebody following you, there's somebody looking at you, there's somebody willing to link arms and just keep moving and take that next step. So those are my reflections.
Again, Karen, thanks so much. But I mean, that's such a terrific strategy you have in terms of always being ready and always being ready at the right time for people, knowing that people aren't just instantly be there with you all the time. It's all a matter of when they're triggered to be ready, right? So again, terrific points, and thanks again so much. And we're going to look forward to an update from you as these things progress. Thanks for your time today. Let's go on now. To close out the panel is our long-term friend, Cheryl Jackson, who is Principal and Chief Operating Officer of BPM. Cheryl has been a close friend and working partner now for 10 years with me, and just delighted, Cheryl, you can join us. I know you're busy as heck just getting in there with BPM, but again, Cheryl serves on so many boards, but I think it's also incredible that she's received the Los Angeles African American Vanguard Award, the Merchant Farmers Woman of Courage Award, and she's been named as Orange County Business Women of the Year, one of the Orange County Business Women of the Year. And again, just a terrific resource for anybody. And Cheryl, thanks for joining us. And can you share with us some of your updated thinking, some of the strategies you're leveraging now in DEI? Thanks.
Absolutely. Thanks, Scott, for having me. And I just want to say this has just been such a meaty conversation, and it's such a privilege to be a part of it. As Scott mentioned, I've been with BPM just slightly under a year as a Principal and Chief Operating Officer. And prior to that, I was with Squire Milner as a Partner and Chief Operating Officer. And I'm also the CEO and founder of Leadership in Heels. And the spirit of belonging across any sector is just something that I'm exceptionally passionate about. I mean, the primary reason why I took the leap of faith after 20 years at Squire to go to BPM is because our business is because people matter. That is what BPM is, and people truly do matter. I have the privilege of leading an operational organization where we won a number of awards around diversity, inclusion, and best places to work. And they've been very intentional on moving the needle forward for both women and the LGBTQIA community. And quite frankly, we have a significant amount of work to do when it comes to diversity, especially around African Americans. And I am in the accounting industry. And I will tell you, and Scott knows this, and many of the friends that are here today know that in our industry, less than 1% are African American. I've been attending the Major Firms event, which is the top 100 firms in the world. And I was probably one of two of the first females to participate. And I am still the only African American in the C-suite that attend these events. And so we have a lot of work to do. And I think that the things that have been said to all of us this afternoon and this morning are prevalent to anything that we want to apply in our business. And one of the individuals said, the key is that we cannot do it alone. I mean, the blessing of being in this forum is that you have a number of resources right on the screen in front of you. You have had some heavy hitters speak to you around diversity and inclusion, and not only what they do for other organizations, for those of us who coach organizations through this, with Dr. Dina, with Anita, with Rhonda, myself. There are so many of us who coach organizations through this, but then you have leaders that are here forward facing that have already tackled this and have had success. So the key is, as mentioned already, is that we do not do this alone. And I think that one of the other things that Rhonda mentioned is that oftentimes we assign a diversity, inclusion, or equity or belonging initiative to one particular individual. Not one individual in our organization has the capacity or the skill to make this happen on their own. We have got to reach across the aisle and make sure that we have other individuals pulling us forward, pushing us and walking alongside of us to ensure that we're going to yield a high level of success. So what I always say is that we need to ask leadership, first of all, why do we even want to do D&I and what is our goal? And as someone already mentioned, is it an initiative? Is it a task? Or is this going to be a cultural shift? And whether or not there is true vested interest starting at the top. And as you already heard, what does that accountability look like? And in my opinion, it's got to hit the bottom line and it's got to hit our pockets at the top. If the leadership does not have any consequential results as a result of us not meeting the expectation, then we're not going to obtain the level of success that we want. So we've got to have true buy-in from our leaders. And then as someone already mentioned, we've got to have effective communication across the entire organization, and we've got to get the buy-in. So what I always say to people, regardless of whether or not you're in a population that's not diverse, you have a diverse population already or not, is that diversity, equity, and inclusion goes beyond what the footprint looks like on the screen. There appears to be a lot of diversity on the screen, but do we have, as Dr. Dina mentioned, the diversity of thought? And when we pose the question to everybody, have you ever been disregarded, left out, or dismissed? And what does that feel like? It puts us all on a common ground, because that is what it means to be left out and not be included. And it's not just about the color of our skin, but it's about the experiences. Now, unfortunately, as African American, we find ourselves in that space far more often than the average person, where we begin to feel invisible. So we have to ask ourselves, what is it that we truly want to solve when we are launching a diversity and inclusion program? And I say, let's solve the problem around individuals not being dismissed, individuals not feeling disregarded, individuals all feeling like they have an equal opportunity to participate in the opportunities that our organizations, our families, and our communities offer. And so what are the strategies that we employ, as many of the panelists have already mentioned, to make sure that we can accomplish our goal? And then how are we going to measure the success? And like I said, tie the financial implications to the success results, specifically at the top. And when you walk away from here today, I mean, we have had some meaty information. We're motivated, we're inspired, everything feels great. But what are the tangible tools that we're going to employ to move the needle forward? So do we want to increase diversity in our organization? By what percentage? Are you willing to increase your vendor relationships? By what percentage? Are you willing to increase your clients? By what percentage? Tie an actual number, figure, a result, and then measure that on an ongoing basis. And as many of the panelists have already said, communicate, communicate, communicate. Look, if you are launching an initiative, we have this in our organization for Black History Month, ask the Black people what's important to them. If you are doing something for the LGBTQIA community, ask them. Don't go it along and think, well, I'm going to launch this program when you don't have any idea what those individuals who are going to be impacted want or need. So solicit the information from the people who you say you want to include. Oftentimes we launch an initiative and we're not even inclusive in the launch. And so it's critical that we are. And if we don't have team members in our camp, reach across the aisle. You have a number of people sitting on the screen, scroll through, pick up the phone, call somebody and ask them to take this journey with you. And then just make sure that you have a major strategy around your recruiting, your vendor relationships, and your client acquisition. And as mentioned with somebody else, create those partnerships with those organizations that can help you accomplish the goal. One of the things that I also wanted to share when we talked about recruiting, because oftentimes when we think about diversity, we focus on our employee base. We focus on the fact that, well, if we can increase the percentage of African Americans, of women, of Native Americans, whatever our end game is, then that's our primary focus. Well, we've got to go to where the people are. So many of us are in populations like myself. I am in South Orange County. It is not diverse. There are not very many Black people. But just as we invest in our marketing strategy to increase our brand awareness and attract our clients, we have to be financially willing to invest in our recruiting strategy, So that means that if we have to reach across the aisle to hire people, then let's offer a relocation bonus. I mean, if we're really serious about this, we've got to put our money where our mouth is. And so I always say that you have to look at your strategies that you're going to execute in order to accomplish the goals that we set forward. And we can't stop at recognition. Many of us get to a certain point, like we have at BPM, and I'm exceptionally proud of the diversity that we have accomplished, of the awards that we're winning, the fact that we are over 50% women, we have women in executive level positions, but we can't stop at what we have done. We've got to continue to focus on closing the gap where we still have an opportunity to grow, and make sure that we are engaging our entire population in the decisions that need to be made so that everybody can get comfortable being uncomfortable, but be committed to moving the needle forward. The last thing that I would leave with you is that, I hope that these last few minutes, we really get questions, and oftentimes we don't because it's uncomfortable. This is a very, very sensitive topic. There are a lot of emotions involved when we talk about diversity and inclusion, and many people feel like they just don't understand. But I always say, if you saw a dog get murdered in the street, would you have compassion? Well, that's the same thing that Black people want. We don't have to be a dog to feel empathy for a dog. And you don't have to be Black to feel empathy for African Americans. We all want to know that we matter. We want to make sure that no one feels disregarded. And so we want to employ the programs, not just to launch diversity, not just to say that we have inclusion, but we want to make sure that we have a cultural shift where everybody knows that they belong. And we won't know that unless we ask. So I just encourage us all to continue these conversations with one another, to be committed to helping each other accomplish the success that we desire, and to not stop once we start to get recognition. But let's blow the roof off of this thing and make sure that at the end of the day, we can all stand proud of what we're doing, not just for ourselves, but for our community, for our employees, and for our future. Scott, you're on mute.
Thanks again,
and I'm
Cheryl.
passionate about this. Like, this is just my thing. I'm so super passionate about it. I think I probably spoke like 70 times after, the George Floyd incident, and speak to a lot of CEOs in my community where there really isn't a lot of diversity. But that's not the excuse. I mean, if we really want to have something happen, we do what it takes. And I think that we all accomplish that together.
Yeah, you're so right. And again, your comments are always so spot on. Your insights are terrific. And again, by the way, for those of you who don't know, Cheryl has her own organization, Leadership in Heels, and her next meeting is March 18th. So if you don't mind, Cheryl, can you put in the chat the link for that one?
Absolutely, I can. Actually, it's the leadership shift. We're going to be talking about, that cultural shift. Putting people first because people matter. And we're going to be talking about all people. So I encourage you, although it's called Leadership in Heels, if you are a woman, it's for you. And if you have one woman in your life that you like to have a meaningful relationship with, because together we are better, then I encourage you to participate as well. So I'll send out the link in the chat, and then I'll give it to Scott so he can email it to everyone as well.
Absolutely. Thanks again, Cheryl.
You're welcome.
Cheryl brought up communications, and I asked Jason Duncan before we get to the audience input to give us a real perspective on what DEI communications looks like internally and externally. So Jason, what we're going to do is have you quickly give us a quick tutorial on DEI communications, and then the final 2 slides, then we'll open up to the audience. Here's what we're going to do. We'll keep to our formal close at 1, but I'm going to leave the room open so we can continue to have this dialogue and conversation. So Jason, let's turn it to you with a quick discussion about DEI communications.
Yeah, so the big question is, how do we communicate our program so people will engage? All this planning, all this change that we hope to have come about doesn't mean anything if we don't clearly communicate. And the big idea here is that clear communication inspires change. And the execution of this communication is key to the success of your program. And you can use a formula for clear communication. And it's important to know that clear communication, great communication is planned. And this also will elevate your employer brand. We talked about this already. It's not something we're setting out to do, but it's a byproduct of it. So we want to make sure that we leverage this in all the places that we can. So, and we can look at Apple. Apple is successful because they can clearly communicate what they do. And you can look at the successful brands. Oftentimes that's why they're so successful, because they understand a formula for clear communication. So we need to figure out our communication funnel. We need to have a plan, and we need to make sure that we're using all the right communication channels. So don't forget that you've got a website, you've got video, you've got email, and those things are really important to getting this messaging out and bringing people along, right? We're all walking together in this, and we need to use these tools to our advantage. Your website is important, and take a quick look at your current website. If it says we or I, it's not focused on the people who you're trying to reach. It's focused on your company. So go ahead and fix that. Look to video, and we saw a great video earlier, but video, what's so good about video is it keeps your message on point. Video never has a bad day. Video never says the wrong thing unless it's live video, and that's a whole other set of issues. And then look to email, and think about having an email sequence. I would say when you're first starting to introduce any type of new idea, you need a sequence of probably 3 to 8 emails to bring people along, to introduce the ideas, to get people on board. And this communication funnel will help you with your internal and external communication. If you've got a sales team in your organization, Scott and I have a webinar coming up next week. I'd love to have you join us. We're actually going to talk about communication from a sales standpoint, but we're going to give you the formula that you can use across your entire business. We're also going to talk about creating nurturing systems, a formula for sales presentations that engage, and how to add video before and after the sale to build trust in your process. I'll turn it back over to Scott.
Okay, and then Jason, if you could put up our final slide on how people can reach us, and then I'll open it up to the room here quickly. You've got a final slide on our key links, I believe. Yep, next one. Okay, so again, for those of you on this, we have recorded the session today. It's going to be on the E&P YouTube next week. We'll give you we'll do a follow-up with the bios to you so you can see this session, and those that perhaps could not see it will be able to participate in the conversation. And of course, all of our events are at this link, enpinstitute.com institute. And then finally, join us as an annual member. We have literally dozens of workshops, forums, events throughout the entire year. Members attend at no charge, and we've got a very aggressive calendar for the remainder of the year covering all topics, including customer centricity, March 25th. All right, so Jason, let's drop the slide. Here's what I'm going to do. We are going to stop recording as of now. And again, thanks to all our speakers, our panelists, our facilitators. Fantastic job. Let's give them all a round of applause, please, while we're Zoom round of applause. And thank you again. And what I'd like to do, Jason, we'll cut the recording here, but I'm going to leave the room open